Hi, mamas. Welcome back to Momsibilities. Today's episode is one of the most important ones because we'll be talking about a topic that doesn't get nearly enough attention. We all have heard about baby blues, PPD, and other mood disorders that moms go through when they're postpartum, but this is something that we need to talk about. It's time. I am talking about postpartum psychosis. I am joined by Nancy with us in Momsibilities today. She's a mom of two. She's the founder of Anim of Postnatal Care. She's also a postpartum doula and she has lived experience of postpartum psychosis. So she will be talking candidly with us on Momsibilities and sharing her journey, how she went through it, how she figured out, how she navigated the whole journey. Hi Nancy, welcome to Momsibilities. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here as well with you. I really appreciate when you first reached out to me and we connected. I'm so glad we did. And it really is a pleasure to be here today with you and with all our listeners.
Thank you so much. Before we dive deep into our conversation about postpartum psychosis, I would just like you to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll talk about a bit about your pregnancy journey.
For sure. So, as you mentioned, I am the founder of Anima Postnatal Care. I also have two little kids. They are now 2 and 4. And I am a postpartum doula as well as actually an accountant. I'm a CPA by profession, but after everything I went through that we'll talk about today, am in the middle of my entire career transition pretty much. I'm also actually a perinatal mental health specialist. I have a certification as well as a new parent educator. So I've done a few things. I'm actually also in the middle of writing a book, which I don't think you knew. And
Yeah.
I am also a speaker. So I do conferences, panels, podcasts, and just sharing more about my own journey, but also just advocating for mental health in general.
Amazing.
Yeah, there's quite a few things.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
You're like just an all rounder. So, before we dive deep into the conversation about PPP, I just want to hear from Nancy what is the difference between baby blues, PPD, and PPP for all the new moms who are listening. I don't want somebody to imagine themselves in a situation that they're really not. So, just for the understanding of our audience, how would you define the three and what are the symptoms to look for?
For sure. So I will definitely provide an overview, but just want to mention that I'm not a clinician or a therapist, but I have done training specifically in perinatal mental health and, of course, have my own lived experience and have met several other advocates along the way. So baby blues is what's referred to generally in the first 2 weeks of postpartum, and it is very common. The statistic is around 80% of women and parents experience this, birthing parents. So essentially, it refers to the intense emotions that we feel right after childbirth, and it can involve lots of crying, mood changes, and feelings of overwhelm and all of those types of things. But as I mentioned, it's extremely common, and many parents feel this way, and it is also driven by hormones, but it tends to go away after a certain period of time. So if it can persist past the 2 week period or roughly around that time, and you experience other symptoms, that's when we start thinking about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, referred to as PMADs. And there are several PMADs, and they can actually overlap in terms of symptoms. You can experience more than one. So I'll give you a couple of examples. There's PPD or postpartum depression, as you mentioned. There's also postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis, postpartum OCD, postpartum PTSD, postpartum panic disorder. As you can see, there are several, and we refer to all of them as postpartum, but they can actually occur during pregnancy as well, and that's why it's referred to as perinatal, which the term means during pregnancy or postpartum. And personally, I feel that, these mood and anxiety disorders can even occur during your fertility journey, right? That factors in, and your fertility journey can impact your pregnancy and postpartum experience, especially when it comes to mental health, because obviously if you have had those challenges, you have a lot more complex emotions coming into it, right? But yeah, so some of the common signs and symptoms of PMADs can include persistent worry or sadness and disconnection from your baby, your partner, not feeling like yourself, right? Changes to appetite or sleep that are not related to your baby. So obviously we know, not you can't sleep 8 hours straight a night when you have a newborn if you're caring for them. But if your baby is a good sleeper, and they are able to sleep for 4 or 5 hours at a time or something along those lines, are you able to also rest during that time, right? And like in my case, I wasn't able to sleep at all because of my own thoughts and not necessarily that she was waking me up. So having those appetite and sleep changes in yourself, and having the racing thoughts, as we talked about, inability to sleep is a huge risk factor. So anytime someone mentions that they aren't able to sleep or experiencing any kind of insomnia, that's a huge red flag in my opinion. And I'm trying to think of other signs and symptoms. I mean, postpartum rage is another very common experience that parents have, but you really want to trust your instincts of if you don't feel like yourself. And
Right.
in many cases, we aren't able to necessarily see it in ourselves. So maybe your family members can see it, can identify that you don't seem like yourself or you seem off, right? And then in the case of PPP, hallucinations and delusions are the signs and symptoms specifically for that disorder. So I'll talk a little bit about hallucinations, but delusions basically just means, or how it's different is it's thinking that something is the case when it's not the case, right? So just losing that connection with reality.
Thank you so much for explaining that. It is very important for the audience to know where to get the support and what are they actually experiencing, right? Nancy, let's start by talking about your pregnancy journey. How did it go? What all were your experiences, and like some insights?
For sure. So I actually got pregnant pretty soon after my husband and I got married. It was definitely unplanned and caught us by surprise. I remember the day I found out. I spent pretty much the whole day crying and in shock. But I mean, after, the initial shock subsided, I was excited. We both were. And, I spent months and months preparing and planning and learning as much as I could.
Right.
So I did several courses on, labor and birth and pain management. I took a hypnobirthing class. I was really fixated on having a natural birth. I also learned as much as I could about newborns and how to care for my child, my daughter, when she came, and all of these things. But what I definitely didn't learn enough about or plan for was postpartum and how to take care of myself. I didn't even really know that was a thing. It never came up in my OB appointments that that's something that I should be, learning about and focusing on. And I didn't have any, at least diagnosed, experiences of any mental health conditions. I definitely struggled with stress here and there. I mean, I'm an overachiever and perfectionist, and, I was driven in my career. And so I did have, I'm sure, like various times, different amounts of stress, but no medications, no diagnoses or anything like that. So and then my pregnancy was also very normal and healthy from a medical perspective, and I'm sure I had feelings of overwhelm here and there, but otherwise very smooth.
But when you say about it was unplanned, did you also feel anything like a mental pressure or anything that you felt mentally you were not ready when you figured out?
I'm sure there were moments where I felt like I wasn't ready or questioning it, but it wasn't like I felt that way throughout my pregnancy or I thought about it every day. Like it was just isolated moments. And I did feel like I wouldn't, my husband and I had several trips planned that year. So I was feeling a little bit like, oh, we won't be able to go on those trips now because of this, right? But I found out in February 2020. And March 2020 we know what happened then. So everyone else's trip plans also got canceled that year and not just mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's jump into our conversation. I know it's very intense and it might not be for every mom listening to us right now, but this is just from the sole purpose of creating awareness about this topic. And, just moms should know that these things, like disorders like these, exist and healing is possible. So that's the whole purpose of talking on the podcast about this, and we'll be talking to Nancy about her experience with postpartum psychosis now.
For sure. So I always say this as well, that, I try to find that balance between advocacy and awareness, as
Yeah.
well as protecting, especially expecting parents that don't have any risk factors or previous history with mental health conditions, or are at higher risk of developing perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADs. But at the same time, I think we all need to have some amount of awareness of it to be able to identify it, not just within ourselves, but within others who we are supporting, friends, family, coworkers, just so that we're able to get them help if they need it. So I do want to, and that's obviously why I do a lot of this advocacy work myself. But aside from that, I totally understand the desire to maintain a positive mindset throughout all of this. So yeah, I don't want to get too much into several, pieces of detail with my story in a way that would upset anyone. So where do you want me to begin?
That is totally up to you, whatever you want to share and however deep you want to go. But let us talk about what you felt right after giving birth.
Okay, so maybe let's begin with my birth then, just so you
Yeah.
understand, like,
Absolutely.
where it started. But
Yeah.
so as I mentioned, my pregnancy was perfectly normal and healthy. That the word normal used to honestly piss me off quite
Yeah.
a bit,
Yeah.
because anytime if I'm sure many other moms have experienced this, that whenever you bring anything up to your OB or your doctor,
Yeah, it's normal.
the word you hear
I mean,
too
it could be
often is
normal for
normal.
someone, but not for us, right? Maybe
Exactly.
something is normal for someone else,
To
but
the
I think
doctor
it's,
it's normal,
yeah,
but to us it doesn't feel
yeah,
normal, right? No, exactly.
absolutely.
So yeah, with my birth, I had a like labor started for me on its own. So I was 9 days late. So that was a whole other struggle in terms of like reaching my due date and then waiting every single day for my daughter to decide to come out.
Yeah.
But essentially I had contractions. I went to the hospital, and I'm not even kidding, like almost 4 bags packed of this like Zen environment that I wanted to set up in the hospital. And I was so fixated on not getting an epidural that I just wanted to create this environment and like mind over matter, the pain,
Right.
and tell myself that it's not pain, it's, waves or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I really, not to like say anything bad about those that do hypnobirthing and it works for them, it just wasn't something that worked personally for me. And I think a lot of it was because even though I had all these things and preparations, I couldn't set that environment up for myself in the hospital. So for me, I was laboring in triage for several hours, and like in behind a curtain in
Yeah.
this like narrow space, but basically just had a hospital bed, because they didn't have rooms available due to COVID. So because of that, I couldn't set up the environment that I wanted. I had like a vision board. I wanted to be on like a yoga ball and like a yoga mat and all these things, but I had no space. Like I literally had
Yeah.
no space to set that up. So even though I had my headphones on and I was trying to like stay in my own head and not pay attention to my surroundings, I could hear the moms coming in and going out and screaming, and like, people all around me. And there was so much external noise, and like it was a distraction that I couldn't get into the headspace that I wanted to create for myself, right? So everything that I had practiced, it wasn't working. So because of all these things, I was actually very tense, and my labor was not progressing as fast as the medical team wanted. So at the point of being like 20 hours into labor, I was throwing up. I was like uncontrollably shaking, which all of these things I didn't know were actually very normal during birth to happen, and they happen to lots of people. The nurse essentially told me at this point that I had to get an epidural. So I did. And from that point onwards, I didn't feel any physical pain, but I just couldn't believe what I had gone through. And it kept replaying in my head. And to me, I felt like a failure at this point. Even though my daughter came, she was healthy. I was physically healthy, and it was a normal birth and delivery. I just couldn't believe that I couldn't handle it, right? I just kept thinking about all the things, like what I could have done differently. And that's really when the racing, like the thoughts and the anxiety started. It was immediately after birth and even
Okay.
during labor. So it was another 10 hours until she came, even after I took the epidural. So it was almost like 30 hours that I was in labor. And so because I had a vaginal delivery, they discharged us within 24 hours, and we went home. And by this point, I hadn't slept already like almost 3 days, if you count labor and delivery and getting home. And my husband also, like, the hospitals are not set up to have, a good resting
Yeah.
space for partners. So he was also so tired by this point. So we both come home at, I don't even remember the time now, but we're both at home and, we're exhausted. I think we got home really late at night and we called my mom. We weren't planning to have her there right away, but we called her, and she came at like 5 a.m. to help us, right? So after that, like the couple of days following us getting home, we took turns, the three of us, taking care of my daughter, and we had shifts, but I was pretty much on every shift because I was breastfeeding, right? Like every 2-3 hours I was breastfeeding her, and in between feeds I was supposed to be resting, and they kept telling me to go nap or to go sleep and everything. But even when I was alone in my room or bed, I just could not shut my brain off. So part of it was replaying my birth, and then now the added part of how to take care of her. Is she okay? What's going on? Just like thought after thought, right? And then about like my milk coming in. Is this normal? My bleeding, is this normal? And I also had a second-degree tear. I had hemorrhoids. It was very like uncomfortable. And I had a lot of physical pain too. So there was just so many different things going on in my head that I could not shut it off. And that went on for days, right? So by the time the day came when I ended up in the hospital, and we'll get into that, I hadn't slept for about 7 days.
Not at all.
Not
Oh
even
my
at all.
goodness.
So I'll take a pause here if you want to ask questions, or I can just keep going.
I mean, I am first of all like very kind of surprised that it started from the birth. So it doesn't always look like, something happening after you give birth, right? It could start from the birth itself if you've had like a traumatic birth or something. And then not sleeping for 7 days, I cannot even imagine, because I did not get sleep, I would say, for 3-4 days. And I remember my midwife telling me that you need to sleep. I
Yeah.
want you to sleep.
Like
Period.
above anything else. Exactly.
Period.
Yeah.
And then I remember I extracted milk, because even though I just, I'm already understanding when you say you can't shut your brain, even though you have support around you, but you're not able to just leave the baby and go rest, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. So 7 days, no sleep, and we all know sleep deprivation, I would say, is a real torture. That also drives you like in different directions, and you're really not able to do anything, right?
The day that I ended up in the hospital, as I mentioned, it had been about 7 days since I had slept. And I started seeing things. So I was hallucinating.
I'm sorry, I should interrupt you here, because I'm just thinking how it started. Like, before we talk about you going to the hospital, like you were in the home.
Yeah.
What did you experience, or what was that point where you felt like something feels off? Was it you, or was it one of the family members who felt like there's something going on and maybe you need some help?
This is the day. Like no one noticed.
Till for 7 days.
Yeah.
But then when you actually go to the hospital, I mean, I'm sure it didn't happen like very smoothly.
I'm going to talk about
What
it.
kind of-
This is the day that like everything
Okay.
escalated in one day. So yeah, the day that I ended up at the hospital, that morning, I mean, up until this point, it had only been 4 or 5 days since we came home, right? So as I mentioned, we were taking turns taking care of my daughter. I was exclusively breastfeeding. We were actually doing great with breastfeeding. My milk came in. She latched pretty amazingly, and it was going well. To an outsider, it was going as well as it could, right? And my husband and my mom were helping to take care of me. Like, they were also making sure that I was fed. Everything was fine. And she was, her doctor's appointments were fine. She was healthy. Everything honestly was going normal. Again, that word. But it was just my mind that couldn't stop, and I couldn't stop the thoughts and go to sleep and rest, right? So that's truly the biggest factor, and I believe, in everything that happened, along with all the hormonal aspects of things, right? And I was definitely crying on multiple occasions, but I never had any issues bonding with my daughter. I never had any negative thoughts necessarily. I mean, aside from thinking about my birth not going as planned, that was the biggest negative thought, but I never had any negative thoughts towards her. I definitely loved her like from the beginning, and I know that can be a challenge for some moms. So I want to acknowledge that. But for me, in my case, that wasn't the case. But yeah, so the day that I ended up in the hospital, that day I had, as I mentioned, multiple hallucinations. So I'll give you an example. I was in the bathroom and I, looked in the mirror and I saw my face, which honestly was pretty difficult to recognize at this point because my face was very swollen and my eyes were super swollen. I was on IV for quite a long time, so I had a lot of swelling in general and even from birth. And my eyes were so puffy from not sleeping and obviously also crying. And it just, I saw my face transforming and turning into my mom's face, like in front of my eyes in the mirror. So that's one example of something I saw, and I just didn't really think much of it. Another example is I started having, obviously this time is very blurry, so I try my best to remember as much as I can, but another example is I know I saw either myself turning into, or I saw images or like visions of Buddha and all these other like, spiritual and religious hallucinations, and just starting to feel like I was God. I saw visions around like the birth and just feeling like, it's such a miracle. And I just felt really connected spiritually to God, and felt like I was God, and just all these different thoughts and feelings related to spirituality, and just it all happened really that one day. And I even felt like I felt like there was wet, like there was liquid on my body, so I couldn't tell, even though I wasn't. I remember just feeling sensations of being wet, right? And I was like, is this wet? Is it blood? Is it like milk? I just felt like I was leaking, and I obviously I was in some cases, but it felt like a lot more than it was. So just different sensations. I also felt like I heard her crying when she wasn't. And I know that is very common. Like phantom cries happen all the time to moms. Doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong, but multiple incidents of these types of hallucinations. And so the point where I ended up in the hospital, how that started was I was sitting on the couch and I was holding my daughter, and my mom came towards me to take her, and so that I would go upstairs and rest like they kept telling me to do. And I told her if she took one more step towards me, I'm going to call 911. And she didn't believe me because this is very out of character, and she didn't really take me seriously, but I did. And I called them and I said, my mom is trying to take my baby away from me. So you can imagine how the cops reacted to that. And so they showed up at our house and interrogated each one of us one by one for an hour. And by the end of it, I was put in an ambulance and sent to the hospital, to the ER. And my husband didn't come with me because he had to take care of my daughter. My parents didn't come with me because they had to go buy formula and bottles. We didn't have any at our house. So I was by myself in this hospital, and I was sitting on a stretcher in a hallway for 7 hours without being seen. And I was stripped of my belongings. So they took my clothes, my shoes, they took my wedding ring, they took my phone. I have no idea why. I was, leaking. And I don't know if I even got like pads. Like no one was really, I just remember my blood pressure being checked constantly. But aside from that, I didn't really have anyone seeing me, right? And then finally my dad showed up at the hospital, and I asked him if this was real, because by this point I was convinced that I was either dead or I was dreaming. So he showed up and I asked him, is this real? And he said, yes, you're at the hospital. He explained it to me. And I was seen by multiple doctors. I'm assuming they were psychiatrists. And they were really struggling to diagnose me. And part of it is because my dad was trying to convince them that nothing is wrong with me and I need to go home. And that I just need sleep, which definitely I did need sleep, but obviously something was wrong. And, in our culture, as you know, mental health is not something that we necessarily talk about, let alone treat. So it was difficult and then I don't even know what I was saying to these doctors, but I was probably going along with it as well. And I don't know how honest I was being with them, right? And what I was sharing, but I went back and checked my records, and they did mention that they suspected postpartum psychosis. But I was discharged with a prescription for sleeping pills. And no one picked it up. I never ended up taking it. And 3 days later, I was back in the ER. But this time I was shaking. My blood pressure and heart rate were over 200. That was actually a really terrifying time because obviously, with that high of blood pressure and heart rate, like it's very dangerous to be at that level. So I was admitted after another 7-hour wait. But my husband was with me this time, and he had packed his stuff. Like, my daughter, thankfully, throughout this entire process was fine because we had both sets of grandparents supporting us. But my husband was planning to stay with me, but they didn't let him. And my family thought that when they called the hospital the second time, because it was a physical issue in their mind, and I just had a baby, that they thought I was going to go back to some kind of like mother and baby unit, like, mother delivery ward or something along those lines. And instead I was admitted to a psychiatric ward, where no one could come and stay with me. So that was very terrifying time, obviously, for me and my family. And I don't know, I don't know anybody, but I don't know if you know anyone that's ever been in a psych ward. It's not something that's very common, right? So it was a very traumatic time. I was there for 6 days. I had nightmares about it, for months. Even when I was there, I was experiencing like heart palpitations. I felt like I was so isolated. I was on suicide watch. I had no idea like how it worked. This was me also learning about the medical system for the first time, because I had never been a patient in a hospital. Like, thank God I was healthy my whole life up to this point. So I didn't know, even that was all new, right? But I was seen by a psychiatrist every day when I was there to try to figure out what was going on, what medication I needed, all the things. And he diagnosed me with bipolar. And I know we don't need to get too much into the technical here, but postpartum psychosis is actually currently tied to bipolar disorder or major depression. I'm not going to go into it too much because obviously I'm not a clinician, but we haven't reached the point of understanding it and defining it in our medical system. So it's still very unclear. So in some cases, right? So for me, it was a huge label to be given during this time when I'm already so vulnerable and, just had a baby and trying to process all of this. And now someone tells me I'm bipolar. Like, it was very, very confusing time. And in addition to that, the psychiatric admission was actually involuntary. So that's another thing. I don't know if you know this, but I was being held there. Like, I couldn't leave if I wanted to. So, there was so many different nuances to everything that it made it very scary, unknown, confusing, and it was just a terrible time, honestly. Yeah. And it took me a long time to recover from that, but it also just made me so passionate about supporting parents and just not letting this happen to anyone because of everything that I went through. And also just realizing, like, I can't believe that this can happen to people after having a perfectly fine pregnancy and healthy life and all of this. Like, I couldn't believe that it was happening to me,
I honestly got goosebumps when I was listening to you. And everything was like just...
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just trying to understand when you said you were sent back home the first time when you went to hospital. I'm trying to understand. I'm questioning the medical system here. Like, is this something that they should have really done?
Definitely not.
That is the time when you really needed some attention and help, right? And not just being left alone. You said that you were by yourself for 7 hours. Being away from your newborn baby and then no support, not letting your partner be with you or any family member be with you, and then just sending you back. It's just like, somebody had a headache or like...
It was very dangerous.
And also I'm thinking what it might have been different if you got attention then in that moment,
for sure,
rather than sending you home and then you end up again in the hospital with more severe,
for sure. Yeah.
issues.
And I have thought about that more recently than at that time, of course. But yeah, I do wonder about it, like what could have happened in those 3 days in between, right? Like, I'm thankful that my hallucinations were never harmful towards myself or anyone else. But in many cases with PPP, that does happen. And so I want to recognize that. And again, it's no one's fault. And it does, through all my advocacy work and volunteer work, I have met many other people now that have experienced PPP. And sometimes I wonder, like, what made it happen that mine weren't harmful and theirs were. And it, even the people that I know that have had the most unimaginable, like, tragedies, it's what makes them different from me if we had the exact same condition. So this thought does bother me at times, or I'm grateful and thankful for my experience, but at the same time my heart breaks for them, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, there isn't enough awareness about it. And in a lot of those cases, I'm sure there wasn't enough understanding from, whether it's from family or from providers, like, because it's not talked about enough, or we don't have enough research around it. And I know this is being actively worked on, and I'm so grateful for that. But we need way more understanding at multiple levels.
I think it should start from the minute we go for our appointments with OBs or
and
midwives.
during pregnancy, exactly.
And I mean, mostly the appointments are just about how we are feeling, like the symptoms, and they are all said to be like normal, right?
I don't even know if anybody asked, if my OB asked me how I was feeling. All I remember is being weighed and measured.
Measured, absolutely.
I was weighed and measured and, like, out the door. I don't know.
I know. I mean, I was with midwife, and
Okay, so
it's like
yours probably
longer
better.
appointments.
Yeah.
And it was better. I would say I had very good support throughout the pregnancy.
Right.
But I still, like, when you said there should have been more awareness, I can recall very easily that I was not really, we were not. We did not have a conversation about how postpartum will look like,
For sure.
not in terms of like my physical recovery, but also mental recovery, right? Or maybe just how I'm going to feel or how I might feel, right?
Yeah.
And I understand that I've spoken to a lot of moms who mentioned that they have taken prenatal classes where they got a little bit of information on
Right.
this. But I think, like, everybody's going for their appointments. Not everyone is taking those prenatal classes.
exactly.
So we should kind of, give more importance on educating moms to be on this. It's like so important, right?
Yeah.
But I do remember, like, when I had my midwife visiting me, she said, "How do you feel?" And I just cried.
Yeah.
Because I did not know how to explain it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I was enjoying being a new mom. Yes, I saw my baby. I'm like so much in love with the little one that me and my partner created, right? But then it was very difficult for me to put into words what I exactly felt.
Yeah.
And I wish, like, if we have more conversations around mental health for new moms or moms to be, it's like it can change a lot, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit detail about those 7 days that you were admitted and what kind of support you got. Was there anyone who gave you like counseling or spoke to you about, okay, you're feeling this way? Because you said like you were not really accepting, right, the things that they said. Did you get any kind of counseling during that time?
That time was the hardest days of my life. There's definitely no counseling, not even close. I was not viewed as a necessarily high risk patient because this was a psychiatric ward where people were actively either trying to harm themselves or others, or were there because of these things, right?
Which
So there
pretty
were,
much sounds very much high risk to me,
Which-
for the person itself. Like,
yeah, it was risky to me.
I
Yes, I felt in danger, of
Yeah.
course, being there, without like understanding why I was there. So yeah, I was terrified to go into the hallway, 100%. And there was no counseling. I could barely get pads, right? Like they're not
Yeah.
set up in a way that they are taking care of a postpartum patient. So, as I mentioned, I had a second-degree tear. I could barely get out of like the bed by myself, and no one was. Did ask for help once, but the nurse like got upset with me when I asked for help. And obviously, like, I had some really great nurses as well that did try to get me, like, the mesh underwear, and I asked for a sitz bath, like all these things I was asking for. They're like, no, we don't have that here, So it was not set up at all for moms. And I also didn't have access to my belongings. Like, they put them away. So my parents tried to like bring me food, or if I wanted to like switch my pants, like, they didn't let me keep my stuff. They wouldn't let me keep my headphones, my phone charger, because of like, in their mind, the risks. So it was just crazy. Like, I had my phone taken away from me at 10 p.m., which I get it. Like, if the focus is on prioritizing rest, that part I understand. But just because you take my phone away doesn't mean that I can fall asleep.
Yeah,
Number one.
absolutely.
And secondly, every 15 minutes, someone came into my room to check on me with a flashlight. Like, how is that conducive to rest?
I'm not able to believe all the things that I'm hearing.
It's just, and every day I was seen by this psychiatrist for like 15 minutes. And in that 15 minutes, he evaluated whether I could go home. So the amount of like power that I felt like he had over my ability to be with my baby, I hated him at the time, right? Like, I was just, it was such a difficult time, and I didn't know how to talk to anyone, like, outside of, I didn't know how to talk to my parents, my husband, let alone friends and family. Like, this is, people asking at this time me, like, congratulating me, or asking like how I'm doing and my baby. Like, I couldn't use my phone for like a month. Literally the first month I couldn't use my phone after everything that I experienced in the psych ward. When I went back home, finally I was discharged, and when I went home, I had so many like additional symptoms because of like the trauma that I felt being in the hospital, right? And it was actually probably more traumatic than my birth. And I was home, but I was just in shock, right? And as I mentioned, I had nightmares, and I just couldn't, like, there was code blues throughout, right, my stay. And there was a point in time, I remember I was in my bathroom and I wasn't allowed to come outside. Like, a nurse came and told me that I had to stay in there. There was, it's not a fun place to be. So, but at the same time, I just want to pause there and mention that I know I'm painting a picture of a very scary place, but at the same time, it is a very, in theory, a safe place to be if you are in like that a psychiatric crisis, right? So at least you're being monitored by doctors and nurses and people that are supposedly equipped to take care of you during this time. But they may not necessarily be specialized in perinatal mental health, right? Specifically. And also, I know people that wish that they had been diagnosed and admitted, right? So I want to just emphasize that this is my experience, and it was traumatizing for me, but for others, they were traumatized being outside of the hospital, right? And because they couldn't get the help that they needed. So every single person's story with this is very unique and personal. And what I have learned now also is trauma is specific to the individual, right? Like, something that I consider traumatic you may not think that way, and vice versa, right? So
And also, I'm just understanding that they did something to you which should not be even the last thing to do, like isolating you and keeping you away from your baby, right? A lot of times I don't know in what kind of, like, in your situation it was different, but I think a lot of times the baby also helps the mom,
for sure.
come out of any kind of anxiety or mood disorders that they are going through. It's the bonding that helps, but they just kept you away from the baby for so long, and then not giving you access to your phone even to talk to someone. But then a 15-minute appointment, what could that do, Nancy? That's like literally, like, I think they were more rushing to you to just see that if you're okay to go home, right? Not really focusing on.
I also have no idea if my psychiatrist had children. I don't know what his expertise or background is in perinatal mental health versus just, mental health in general or psychiatric conditions. So who knows, like how much he knew about this, right? But also, you're absolutely right. The way that I did end up recovering after getting home was by spending more time with my daughter, because I was away from her for a week. And even though in hindsight it doesn't feel that long, that was half of her life at that point. Right. So I came back and I felt like I didn't know her and everyone else knew her better than me. And I was like jealous and I didn't know how to change her diaper and I just wanted to be with her. Right. And on top of that, we haven't even talked about how I lost my milk supply because of our separation. So I carried that guilt of not, as soon as I came home, she wouldn't latch. So, I couldn't breastfeed her. And that was what I had intended and wanted. So I cried about that for several months afterwards. And it was essentially taken away from me. Like it wasn't my choice, right? And yeah, I was doing therapy initially when I came home, and after a certain point, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore right now, because I would rather just spend time with her and make up for that time. Right. And so I did, as I started bonding with her and spending more time with her, and I was on medication for sure for 5-6 months. I did start feeling better, and I started my therapy much later on, when I was pregnant with my second. But during that time, I think definitely spending more time with her definitely helped in my recovery for sure.
Now I would like to talk a little bit more about your recovery. And like you said, you were on medication and you took therapy. But before we talk about that, I just want to understand, did you get the support from your family or friends, and how did you feel after coming back to your place with your baby? What was like, how did you feel when you met people? Did you feel like any sort of shame? Because we know there is stigma around this, and now you're talking about it so candidly and openly, but how did you really feel when you were in that situation?
So when I came home, no one aside from like my parents, in-laws, and husband, no one else really knew what was going on. So I didn't post baby pictures or share the news about my daughter until almost like a month after, I think. As I mentioned, I barely was able to use my phone. It was just too overwhelming. So when I did start sharing more and more about what had happened, some of my friends that came to see me afterwards, like literally cried when they heard my story. And it was difficult. And a lot of my family members, until I started sharing more openly now, or maybe even till this day, don't really know what happened, right? But it was a very isolating experience. I hadn't ever really met anyone up to this point, like let alone PPP. I hadn't even really met someone that talked about postpartum anything, right? So I definitely felt like the first. And they supported me in the sense that they listened, but they couldn't necessarily relate, any of them, right? I did have an amazing support group through the hospital that I joined. And this was also, by the way, peak COVID time. It was October 2020. So limited support available, at least physically. But I did have a virtual support group that I joined through the hospital. And that support group, I'm still in touch with today, 5 years later. And, last year we shared pictures of our kids starting kindergarten. So it's a very special group that we've maintained up till now. But they had all experienced some kind of PMADs. And so I felt really connected and like I was able to open up to them. So that was really helpful during that time. And then beyond that, I was on medication, as I mentioned, and I was determined to not be on it my whole life. So I did want to work on cutting it down, but I was monitored very closely with the psychiatrist from the hospital, and we connected every week or 2 weeks virtually to chat about how I was doing. And I did therapy, as I mentioned, for a little while and then picked it up again afterwards. But beyond that, just really spending time with my daughter, right? That was the biggest therapy. And just going outside with her, at least like, where we could go during COVID. I'm trying to remember the time. It feels like so long ago now, that time, right? Yeah, I don't know. It was definitely gradual. It wasn't like one day I woke up and felt like myself.
Yeah.
It happened over like very slowly over a period of time.
Of course, yeah. Recovery can take different time for every mom. It cannot be the same. If we are talking about one mom who recovered in 2 months, I just want the listeners to understand that don't try to benchmark your recovery. Every
Yeah.
pregnancy is different. Every postpartum is different. So let us not imagine and kind of compare our journey with another mom's journey. And I'm so curious to know, when did you feel you were ready for the second one? Because having gone through such
Yeah.
experience, I'm sure it took a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. So first off, the only reason I had a second is because I'm an only child, and I know what that experience was like, and I did not want my daughter to go through that. And I'm not saying, everyone that has one child, it's not like I'm saying there's anything wrong
Yeah.
with that. My childhood had a lot of other factors tied into it that made it difficult, but it definitely was isolating to be an only child. So I was determined to give her a sibling. So it took a while. I think I got pregnant. My daughter was probably 18 months old or so, and it it was a decision that my husband and I came to together. And I had gone back to work. I fully felt like, like myself, and I felt prepared. We did want a smaller age gap so that they could be close. So I didn't want to wait too long. I definitely don't think I was ready before the 18-month mark. So as soon as I started feeling like I could imagine this happening, I told we started trying. And I knew, like, as soon as I got pregnant, that I had to do a lot of things
Yeah.
to make sure that I felt ready to go through all of that again, and to make sure that I would protect my mental health this time around and take several steps to do that, right? So I spent months preparing by I took some time off before my due date I did prenatal yoga like very regularly. I did start the therapy again, and it was more so to manage my anxiety around it happening again, experiencing PPP again, and also to finish the processing that I hadn't done back then. So we revisited everything that happened, and obviously that was difficult, but I really had to go through that, right? And I did like visualizations, and I did a bunch of things. I also started seeing a psychiatrist during my pregnancy preventatively to talk about options and what the plan was, and when I would take medication and what I should be doing, and what resources I have and who I should contact. So just having a very detailed plan in place so we know exactly what to do. And then I stayed at the hospital an extra 5 nights. And this was part of a program that I learned about, thankfully, through my psychiatrist, where it was offered because I was higher risk for mental health. And it was like a sleep protection program that I participated in, and they helped to take care of my son at night so I would rest. So that was one of the huge things that helped. And then, of course, I had a team of doulas at my house the first month, and I slept so well that first month. And that was just something that I made the decision to invest in, because there was no way I was going to let all of this happen again, right?
Yeah.
So it was multiple different things, steps that I took to do to protect myself, and just prioritize my mental health, prioritize my sleep. And I did breastfeed my son, but at night he was bottle fed, and that's a decision that we took from birth to protect my sleep. So it was just, I'm so thankful that it didn't happen again, and that all the like steps that I took did work out in the end. And then of course we had the added factor of having my daughter as well to take care of during this time. She was around 2.5. And so my husband helped a lot with her, and we still had grandparent support as well. But yeah, it was a much better experience the second time. The birth also went a lot better. I felt much more in control and involved in the decision making around it, so it didn't feel as much like it was happening to me. I went in being open to getting an epidural this time, and like I took it. I actually wanted it, and I could barely get it because I was already time to push, so I ended up getting a spinal instead. But yeah, it was a much better birth and postpartum experience.
I'm so glad to hear
Yeah.
that. So, Nancy, being a certified mental health specialist, if there is a mom who's actually in the thick of it right now, what would you say to her?
So, depending on, what stage you're at, if it's postpartum, it can feel like you're the only person in the world that is experiencing this. And I was actually just talking to one of our clients yesterday about this, that when you go through these challenging experiences, whether it's during birth or during postpartum, you truly can feel like you're the first person in the world to be having a baby, and to be having, and not to minimize it by any means, but just to validate your experiences and to make you realize how not alone you truly are. So actually, for fun, the other day I asked my ChatGPT how many moms at one time are awake, or parents are awake at night with their newborn, like for a feed or whatever. And across the world, the answer was 5 million. Okay. So just think about that. Then I asked specifically in our time zone, and the answer was 500,000. 500,000 people in our time zone are awake at night at the same time as you. So I'm going to be telling this number to everybody. I mean, I have to go fact check it first and just double check the numbers and make sure it's actually accurate before I start spreading it. But truly, like, think about how many people are doing this and feeling this way and are like, isolated at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the time when we feel like, oh, I'm just, the whole world is sleeping and look at me, I'm awake with my baby.
Exactly.
Alone. Yeah.
Exactly. So, there's a ton of babies out there that are up, and a ton of parents that are up with their babies. So honestly, it can be so isolating, but you're not the only one going through it. And on top of that, we didn't even mention the statistic. The statistic for PMADS is 1 in 5 currently in Canada, and I believe in the US as well. So 20%, right? Like 1 in 5 people are experiencing a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. So it's very common.
Definitely.
And those are only the reported rates. Like, it's probably much higher than that, because who's actually reporting these things, right? So just number one, that knowing that you're not alone in this, and secondly, it can also really feel like you can't, like, how will you get out of this? And it may not seem possible at times, but obviously I'm here, as an example that you can recover, and my story is pretty extreme. So if I can, get through that, and again, not to minimize anyone else's experience. And I hate comparing, one person's experience to another's, especially when it comes to motherhood and parenthood, because to you, it can feel much worse than maybe to somebody else, right? And your experience is your experience. Like, regardless, it's hard, right? So just knowing that recovery is possible, and there are several resources and supports out there for you. There's a lot of support groups. I do a lot of volunteering with organizations that are in this space. So there is help, but you need to be able to access it and ask for help and know when to ask for help. So there, that would be my biggest piece of advice, to, if you do feel like something is not normal, or you feel off, then just being more cautious and asking for support.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Animav now. How it started. When did you feel like, okay, this is something you want to do? Where did this come from?
For sure. So, I mean, when I was sitting in the hospital, I knew I had to do something. Like, even as I was not okay and, going through it, I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. I need to tell people. I can't let this happen to other people. So the seed was planted right at that moment, but I had to go through my own recovery journey. And then I did go back to work. I wanted to have a second child, have a second maternity leave, and I did all those things. And then I think truly when I felt prepared was after having a positive second experience. So by this point, I was in a much better, headspace. I knew that I didn't go through it again, and it wasn't as fresh. There was distance from my experience, and I felt ready during my second mat leave to start thinking about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to support other parents. So I started researching and working with consultants and planning out everything. Initially my idea was to have a physical space, but knowing how long and expensive that would be, it just didn't feel as immediate. So I shifted, and this is all part of the entrepreneurship experience and journey, like shifting and figuring things out along the way. But I shifted to the in-home model. And so now we provide in-home support as well as virtual support. And that just felt much faster to be able to start. So I built up our team, and we started offering our services in August last year.
So what are the services that one can expect from Animov? Like what is your team like, and what are the services that you offer?
For sure. So we offer postpartum doula services, daytime and overnight, as well as lactation support. We actually offer prenatal lactation appointments so that you can learn more about what to expect, even if it's not your first, if it's your second or third. If you had previous breastfeeding challenges, we can talk through that to try to support you with your breastfeeding journey, essentially. And then postpartum visits as well, of course, for lactation support in home as well as virtual. And we also have sleep consultants that support in your child's sleep to help establish healthy sleep habits. I know that's a challenging area for many families. And then we have psychotherapy available virtually as well, specifically related to all of the things that we've been talking about in terms of supporting with PMADs, and not just specifically PMADs, but just in general mental health during this time.
Right.
And we have a team of practitioners that offer all of these services, and they are spread out across the GTA. So we are able to go visit clients in home in several different cities across the GTA, and also support them virtually with the other services that I mentioned. So I truly love this aspect of my entire journey, is that I'm able to do my own healing by helping protect our clients' mental health and their stories and experiences. And my goal really with starting NMAV and offering all of these services with the amazing team that we have is to be able to help them create a positive postpartum journey and experience, rather than looking back at it with any negative emotions the way that I felt with my first.
Yeah. And now we can move on to any final piece of advice that you have for the new moms or parents in general who are listening to this.
I would say one of the biggest things I have learned as a parent now of two, my daughter's almost 5 at this point, is that, there's so much unpredictability when it comes to kids. And if you're someone that is used to feeling that sense of control, and, you're a perfectionist maybe, or a planner, it can be really difficult to go through parenthood because kids are the opposite and they force you to change those ways. So I'm not saying obviously to change your entire personality, but just trying to give yourself that space to not be perfect as a mom. There's no such thing, right? And it can be really hard because you care about this little child and being so much that you want to be perfect for them, but that can really take a toll on you in many ways. So just knowing that you're doing your best and trying to do your best and not reach that level of perfection. I don't even want to get into social media and how it impacts all of these things, but that would definitely be one of my main pieces of advice, and just trying to stay just a little bit flexible because they are constantly changing, and especially in that first year. Just when you think that you have everything planned and figured out, they change on you, right? And obviously I'm sure you can relate to this.
I can definitely, yes. Already, like, he's just 5 months old.
Exactly. So that would definitely be one of my biggest pieces of advice.
I would say, like, even you can just expect the unexpected. Right? We cannot have it all figured out even after having the baby. That's not possible. And don't just plan on doing everything like you planned, because that's when the disappointment steps in, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It was amazing chat. I did get goosebumps pretty much throughout the conversation, but I am very glad to have this conversation because as is there's like many moms who are kind of suffering silently, and there's not a lot of resources available, I would say, and not a lot of people have the courage to talk about it openly, just share their journey. So thank you so much for being on Momsibilities, and I hope we are able to help new moms with this conversation.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. And you mentioned resources. We actually have on our website a link to some free resources, and obviously our services are also available to support anyone who needs it. So, I'm also fully available to answer questions
Yeah.
and have a chat anytime. So, do please reach out if you have any questions or want to
Yeah,
connect with me.
I'm gonna pin down the website for Anima when you can reach out to Nancy, and their team is very supportive, very helpful. So just feel free and explore the website and the benefits.